welcome to another episode of the IDS Podcast. We're here with two guests. I think this is going to be our only episode of the season with more than one guest, so it's pretty exciting. But I'm here with Estelle Weiss and Conte, who I've got to know over the last month working on a project together. But before we start, I'm going to give you guys a minute to just quickly introduce yourself. I mean, this whole episode is going to be about you guys and your journey, so you don't have to go too crazy, but who you are and where people can find or see some of your work, whether it's social media or your website, just so people can kind of get an idea if they want to, while they're watching or listening, and take a look at what you're doing.
My name is Estelle Weiss, and my company is Estelle Weiss Designs. And actually, my new website is under construction, which I hope will go live next week. So it'll be Estelle Weiss Designs, New York.
Well, by the time this releases, it'll be live.
Right.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
All right, cool.
I'm Conti. My business is Conti Interiors. That's how it's listed on my website. Conti is with an E. I know a lot of people spell it with an I. And also on Instagram at Conti Interiors. And I'm an interior designer in Huntington.
Cool. So we are currently filming on Elements Lighting and Decor. We are Car Place. So we want to thank them for giving us the location today, and go look them up. They have some awesome stuff. And they actually also recently contributed to the project we worked on together. So we can start with that because that's how we got to know each other over the last month or two. They contributed to the new John Thiessen Foundation, the new space. And John's going to be on an episode this season also, so it's pretty exciting, and people are going to get to really learn about what he does and also learn about, from his perspective, the project that you worked on with him. But it was a pay-it-forward project that I think IDS does it once a year or 2 a year. I don't know exactly how many they do.
Well, COVID kind of interrupted it,
Yeah.
but they usually had one big project a year. They've done veterans' homes, and we did a soup kitchen one year, so it's a great part of IDS for me to be in the Pay It Forward projects.
Cool. So this year, IDS did the Pay It Forward project with John Thiessen, and we redid his, what's the official name, the center or the child center, or I don't know what it's officially called.
It's called the Family Center.
Family Center.
He had been in a small storefront, and then he purchased this house. And he'd always wanted to purchase that house, and his mother encouraged him to do that. She passed, and that house went up for sale.
And I found out afterwards he lives actually right next door.
Right next door, because he wanted more of the property. And in order to get the property for the parking lot, he needed to have the second house. So he wound up doing that. But he's really an inspirational kind of guy, and working with him was really, and doing for what we were doing it for sick children and indigent children, was really an exciting experience, and part of what I've done previously in the background. So it was exciting. And then we got to work as a great team. There were 4 of us, and it became like a really good team, and we got to, work together.
It was a ground-up project, but it was great to work with someone who is so dedicated to children with cancer, but just children in the community. And, having come through cancer himself, it's just amazing that he's really dedicated his whole life to doing this, to live next door to a place that he could always be available. I mean, social workers have him on speed dial. He never tells anybody no. He's a really amazing person.
Yeah, and we'll go into more detail on that episode, but it was really fun to work on that project. I obviously got to photograph it when it was done, and it's a really, truly remarkable space with an arcade, a movie theater, the whole basement full of toys, and just craft room, just everything in there. So definitely, if anybody doesn't know about what John Thiessen does, definitely look him up. But let's get to the nitty-gritty of this episode, because this episode is sort of, I don't know what to officially title it, but it's kind of going the route of interior design as a second career, or a fifth career, as you said. So we'll get into that, because both of you had different career paths before this, and then you got into interior design later in life. I shouldn't say later in life, because you're just beginning. You're just beginning, but you got into interior design as a second career path, and I want to talk about that journey and how that works and how that goes, and how you decide you don't want to do what you've been doing, and how you decide to go to interior design. So I'll start with you because you're closest to me. Sorry, Christine. But okay. So what were you doing before this all 4 times?
I started my career, my first career. I went to college for elementary education. And I also have a degree in school administration. I'm halfway to a doctorate. I should have finished that doctorate, but other things happened and I didn't.
Life.
But, well.
Life happens.
Somebody in my life. But I was very dedicated as a teacher, and I did it for 14 years. And then I reached a point where it wasn't creative enough for me. I got to the point where I needed more. So I left teaching, and I went back to school, and I took art advertising and advanced journalism, and I went into public relations and marketing.
Okay.
And I did that.
How long were you in education before you?
14 years.
Okay.
See, if I tell you all the years that I'm in, then people are going to add up how old I am. But anyway.
I'll stop asking that question.
Okay. But then I went into public relations and marketing. I'm only kidding. I don't really care. I went into public relations and marketing, and I worked in Great Neck for the Park District. I was they call it community relations, but I was basically their PR person. I did newsletters and openings of buildings. But while I was there, they were doing a new building, and they asked me to work with the architect to design and furnish a tennis house where people went to, sign up for their tennis courts and wait and stuff like that. And it was interesting because I started with that, and I worked with the architect and the contractor, and it was just an interesting thing. When I left the Park District, I went to work for LIJ, and I went into their PR office, and I did events and writing, and I did articles and public relations and stuff. And then while I was there, they were building the Women's Comprehensive Health Center on Northern Boulevard, and they asked me to work with the architect and I did all the floral arrangements, artwork. I designed the, they did an opening. I designed the invitation, and we did a giveaway, and I matched the giveaway, which was a paperweight, a green paperweight glass, and it matched the entrance sign. So it was sort of, really got into the whole thing. Then,
so you weren't yet a designer, but they asked you to do
all those
design.
things. Then I was director of patient relations at LIJ, and then when they merged, all middle management lost their positions. So I went and did other things. I got my real estate license and stuff like that. And then I went back to education because there was an ad in the New York Times, which doesn't exist anymore. People don't get jobs from the New York Times. I went back into education. I ran adult ed programs.
Okay. And
then I was principal of an elementary school. And then I decided it was time to really do and I was also asked while I was in adult ed to redesign and carpet the lobby and stuff like that of the building I was in. So everybody kept saying to me, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? So I did it. And I decided to retire, and I went back to school. I went to MID for 2 years, and I took interior design. And I decided that's, if I was going to do my last career in my life, it needed to be creative, which, I needed to do that. In education, it's not as creative. You think out of the box, and people get nervous, and that's what used to happen.
Yeah, I feel like you're in a little bubble.
Well, it was to a point. But the thing that I found was all these different careers built on each other. And I also work for my husband, who's an accountant. I do taxes and stuff. But all those different careers have built up so that I can do project management and finance and budgeting. So when I work with people, I'm more cognizant of their finances and stuff like that. So I think all of that has helped me. But my own creative piece has always been there. It's just a matter of how it went.
I mean, I think experiences throughout life in general lead you to where you ultimately end up in life. I mean, look, I don't know if you know my story, but my father's a photographer, and I've been in the industry since I'm 10 years old. And he's weddings. And like you said with education, I always have weddings to fall back on because that's what I know and that's what I'm into. And if for some reason interiors or architecture or photography doesn't pan out for me, I can always go back to weddings. I've been doing it for 30 plus years at this point. And you have that, I guess, with education. It's always there for you.
I went back, and the good thing was, of course, there's some leeway in it because I did have a retirement. So, and I had a retirement from LIJ, which I used to put into also. But this retirement helped me, give me some stability at this stage of my life, and gave me some flexibility so that I could say, well, I didn't need this big job that paid me lots of money. I could, start out and have a cushion.
Start a new business.
And have a cushion to start that
Well,
business.
that's important because, when you're starting, especially, when you're not 20s out of college and you need money, to start from scratch with nothing is, you can't do it. It's funny, like I was talking to my wife about potentially years ago during COVID, potentially moving down to Florida. And I'm like, I can't start from scratch again. You just can't do it. So, no, I definitely hear that.
But each time I did start from scratch. But as I said, each job built on the last job. People said to me, gee, this is interesting. Your background in doing, I did, when I was at LIJ, I used to put courses together and send, hospital personnel to teach classes in different things. And I came up with creative ways of doing that. So when I went to adult ed and I had to create classes, it was just like, oh, I've done that before. What's the, thing? It is what it is. I think that pieces of life always built on, and how you react to them is...
Look, they ultimately add up to what you become. There's a podcast I listen to called How I Built This. I don't know if you've heard of it, where Guy Raz interviews CEOs of very successful companies or founders and how they started. And he always asks this question at the end, how much of your success is attributed to luck or just hard work. And, you bring it, the way you said it, that's what made me think of it. It's kind of like a little bit of every experience you have in life leads to these situations where maybe when those lucky things come up, you're prepared to handle them. Because
your experience is your skill set.
Exactly.
And the other thing, too, is helping professions. I'm not going to say about Christine, but being in helping professions like we were, it molds us to help people. We extend ourselves into helping professions, because I consider education or the hospital helping professions.
Yeah.
And that
you learn how to
gave us
talk to
that.
people, you learn how to be empathetic, you learn all that stuff.
Exactly.
And you're there because you want to help people.
Exactly.
So it's the same. We do this because we want people to live their best life in their home. So it's got similarities.
All right, so you have a little bit of a different path.
Yeah, so I grew up in a medical family. My dad's a pharmacist. My brother was always going to be a surgeon. He knew that from very young on. But it was just kind of known that you were going to be something medical in my family. So I got my RN, and I worked in Manhattan for 14 years. I worked for 4 years at NYU in pediatrics, and I worked for 10 years at New York Hospital on a locked psychiatric unit. So it's a little bit different, but in some ways, I didn't even know interior design was a career growing up. I mean, I just thought that was something that rich people did with their friends and in Manhattan. But when I lived in the city, Saturday night was going out with your friends. So Friday nights I saved money, and I used to go to every bookstore in the city. I loved it. And I kind of discovered architecture that way. And then that kind of led into, there's design out there too. And I just thought it was a fun thing to do. I lived in hospital housing. It's the ultimate white box challenge. You get these little tiny apartments, and I did my apartment, and then everyone's like, your apartment's so cute, can you help with mine? And
what is it? I don't know what that is, hospital housing.
Hospital housing is very small apartments that they give to the hospital staff. Okay. And I mean, they're tiny. They're usually one room with a tiny little galley kitchen and a tiny bathroom, and everyone lives together in them. It's a very affordable way to live in the city, but there's nothing in there. They're just white. So it was a fun way to kind of express yourself, and then people saw what I did in theirs, and can you help me in this one? So it was kind of like, oh, if you don't know what to do, just go ask Chris. She'll pick your paint color, rearrange your furniture, and stuff like that. And there was a very famous, on Design Star, they used to say it was a white box challenge, and they gave them a white room, and they had to do whatever they were going to do in it. And I was like, oh, I've been doing that already.
Did you enjoy that, or you were like, leave me alone? I just want to come here and sleep.
It was fun. I liked it, but I never really thought of switching careers for it. But New York Hospital is right near the New York School of Interior Design. And I always used to walk past there, and it's like, oh, look, they're doing a color class or this. So I took a class. I'm like,
subconsciously,
yeah, I was like, let's see what it's about. And I was surprised how much design is actually based on science. I mean, the whole theory of color is all science based, and percentages of hues and contrasts and color saturation and how your brain perceives it. And when you go to school for science and you realize something you enjoy is science-based, and the more I looked at it, even architects, everything is so science-based and proportion-based. And if you look at like Frank Lloyd Wright and that crazy origami chair, how could that be comfortable? But you sit in it because it's so perfectly proportioned to the human body. And I was like, oh, so it's studying the human body, and that's what design really is. So to me, it was starting to meld together that there's not so much of a difference. I'm taking care of someone and studying the human body. It's just in a different sense. But when I moved out to Long Island and I had my son, I was looking for nursing jobs on the island, and they just weren't as dynamic as everything was in the city. And I decided I was a drug rep for a little while after that. I was your Lipitor Viagra girl, so I was very popular. I worked for Pfizer. But after I had my son, I kind of felt bad I wasn't going back into nursing. I feel like my parents sacrificed a lot for me for my education and to go into it. And my mom had said to me...
And you had a medical family.
Yeah, she's like, you're always so good. You seem to enjoy yourself when you're helping people design their houses. Why don't you go back to school for that? And I went to the same school Estelle did at Metropolitan Institute.
Were you there at the same time or no?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but it worked out. It was the same hours my son was there in school. So I got a new degree, and I worked for an interior designer at her firm for 2 years. And then I went out on my own. But I feel there's a very similar system, like whether it's you and the patient at the center and you're contacting pharmacy and dietary or the doctor's office, or it's you and the patient at the center. And I feel it's very similar now with me and the client at the center, and now I'm talking to the plumbers and the electricians and the architects. So it's still bringing all the information back to you and the client. And like you, I mean, I managed a 32-bed psychiatric unit doing charge nurse. I mean, that's a lot of juggling, and there's always emergencies, and there's always problems, and so
we should record a bonus episode with all your psychiatric ward stories.
But it's ended up like getting information on like biophilic design and how the body responds to color and whatnot. I'm sitting there on the unit, and I'm like, wow, the seclusion room really should be pink. Why is it gray? A pink room would calm people down, and it would... So, you try to... It's like, could we paint the seclusion room? And, they thought I was crazy. But I always thought I was going to go into healthcare design. I always thought there was such a great way that I could contribute. And even being on the pediatric unit, I was like, I want to go in the playroom. I want to do something that will help these kids feel better, not just giving them their treatment, but a way to feel better in their environment. But I found out you need a doctorate to be a healthcare designer. There's really only a few big firms in the country, and they just kind of travel around the whole country and do the hospitals.
One of my clients is a healthcare, E4H. I don't know if you know them. They're a healthcare. They're all over the country, and they only do healthcare. And like you said, they have like 15 offices.
I was like, do I go back for that much education and travel? I was like, that's not really what I wanted to do. So getting more into residential design, and I really like the philosophy of finding out about the client. I mean, maybe that's my psychiatric background. I like to talk to people. I like to figure out what makes them tick. And I don't really want someone to come up to me with a Pinterest picture and say, like, do this for me. Because I want to know you grew up in a yellow kitchen and you had great meals with your family there. And because of that, you really like the color yellow and you'd like that incorporated into your room somehow. So to me, that kind of design will make you happier in the long run, as opposed to just like, we copied this off of Pinterest.
We have to do shiplap because she's putting it on HGTV.
But it's that building of the skill set. I'm very comfortable talking to people. I have a very long introductory quiz I do with my clients.
Like
and
an onboarding process.
Yeah, and they're like, wow, you never even thought you'd want to ask me this question or that question. But it's all kind of putting together what's going to make them happy in their home.
No, that's important, and finding out what they want and what their expectations are. I do something similar too. When I get an inquiry, people are like, what are your rates? I'm like, before I send you my rates, let's just get on a call and let's speak, because I want to make sure that they know what their expectations are, that they know what they're looking for and how my imagery can accentuate their branding. And most of the time, they don't even know that. They just know they shot a cool project and they want to take pictures of it, but they don't know if what I'm going to deliver is going to work for their branding. They just email 20 photographers. So yeah, doing that onboarding process and really making sure that their vision and your vision align is crucial. But this really interests me because I never really thought about this, and obviously I don't come from a design background, although I see design all day. But I have a bunch of clients that are known for a certain type of work, and that's what they get hired for. And I feel like you're kind of like flipped in a different way where you.
Yeah, I'm anti-niche, and I know it's a horrible business plan. They tell you if you want to make money, do niche design, and this way you're known as the blue and white designer. You're known as the just neutrals and texture designer. I would get very bored doing that. I want to know about you and what you want in your home, and a lot of times. Right. People who are hiring designer for the first time, they don't even know that. They're like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I'm going to find out about you first, and then that's what I'm going to do. I don't just come in and drop a design in your living room. We're going to find out about
dinner,
you.
Let's talk for an hour and a half.
What goes on in this living room? How does your family live in this living room? What do you envision using this space for? It doesn't matter what I want to do in there. I tell my clients, I go home at some point. Sometimes it's longer than others, but I do leave at some point, and you have to be left with a home that you love. It's got to function right, and it's also got to look right. You have to be proud of it.
You have to be happy and comfortable. You have to be wanting to come home to your house, not the picture that you saw.
Correct.
Because if you look at what the shiplap lady was doing on HGTV, if you watch enough episodes, you'll see that it all looks the same.
Correct.
And people all go the same way, but, I have to have the shiplap and I have to have
that's what trends are, essentially.
But that show was about Joanna.
Right.
It wasn't really about the clients.
At all.
We focus on the clients. That's our job.
That's what people don't understand. They think that if they're going to watch the show, that you're going to come in with the idea as opposed to them helping you come in, give that idea. I can't know that you hate gray if I bring a whole gray bathroom in because you saw it on Pinterest or on TV and you don't like it, or you don't like shiplap. You think it's like ugly. I'm not going to do that to you just because you saw it in the picture and you thought it looked cool.
So I think your comparison of the yellow kitchen is the best, because subconsciously they have that nostalgic feeling of that yellow kitchen growing up, and they probably don't even know it. But when they mention that, hey, they grew up eating their breakfast cereal in a yellow kitchen, and then you're like, all right, we have to incorporate this somehow. Or there was the
opposite thing, like, my parents had this green sofa and it was covered in plastic. Whenever I got punished, I had to go sit on the green sofa. Please don't ever put green in my room. It's people have an association with things, but unless you explore it with them, they don't know.
They don't know when you don't know.
And it's to my advantage, because I might throw green in. I don't want to know at the last minute you hate green. I want to know ahead of time so that I can formulate things that you're going to like and also function. There's the functional aspect of it, and then there's the emotional aspect.
It's also about things when you're growing up, or even when in an opposite. And another thing is when getting divorced. If you're working with someone who just got divorced, and there was something in the house that was a trigger to a bad memory, then you don't want to do that either. That's another issue which you come across.
Well, there's always issues. I mean,
Right.
back before I shot interior design and architecture, I used to shoot real estate, and those were the worst things to deal with. Like when you go into a house that are going through an ugly divorce or whatever, and I mean, I had a house literally. I'll tell this quick story where they were going through a messy divorce, and he lived in the basement, and she was she was upstairs because they didn't want to move out of the house, and he didn't want to sell. She did. I was there to photograph the house for the agent. And he didn't want to sell, and he wouldn't move off the couch in the basement of the house. The basement
funny.
was purposely a mess. He didn't clean it, and we just didn't shoot that basement. So it's messy and it's ugly.
But that's why when you're starting over again, I even know from my own experience when I started over again, there were things that I did that I purged the house of and redid in a different vein because it reminded me of the bad things. So do you want to avoid memories of the bad things, or you want to bring in memories of the good
nostalgic memories? So let's talk. We're getting a little low on time, but let's talk about that actual transition when you said to yourself, "All right, I'm done nursing, or I'm done with education and everything else you did, and this is what I'm going to do." How was that process? How was I know you said your family was supportive, which was great considering you come from a medical family and you were leaving the medical field. But what was that process like for you guys? What was going on in your heads, and how did? Was it scary?
Well, my biggest fear was that I had done so many other things and that I was older than other people in the class. And I remember when I was being interviewed to enroll in school, and I sat down with Tony and I said, my concern is, am I going to now be with all these young people who are going to say, what's this old lady doing here? I don't feel that way, and I don't think that I emit old lady kind of thing, but I worried about my age. It was the first time I worried about my age being a hinder. But I was gung-ho. I was ready to go. I was ready for a new adventure because I had done all the things right. All the things that you're supposed to do. I supported a child in a house during my divorce of many years, and I, worked my way through college. I did all the things I was supposed to do in life. Now I wanted to do something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be creative. I wanted to take whatever I had in the past and use it in another way. I could still help people. I could still do good, but I wanted to do it in a creative way that I'd longed to do when I left teaching because I didn't want to teach subtraction with regrouping one more time. So,
do you want to tutor my son? That's what he's learning now.
Subtraction with regrouping and zeros?
Oh, it's the
terrible.
worst.
Anyway, but I couldn't do it again. There was just only so many ways you could teach that. But I felt at this point that I was going into for me, this was my it was almost like self-care. It was what I wanted to do. I love wallpaper and fabrics. To me, putting interesting color together was exciting, and I needed an exciting kind of a job.
No, I applaud that, and it's hard to realize what you need internally to progress. And if you can realize that, then it's great because I don't have to tell you how many people get caught up in mundane 9-to-5 jobs that they despise and do it for 45, 50 years.
I never hated what I did. Everything was long term. I did it for big chunks of my life. Some people don't spend that much time in a career, but I did. But it just got to the point, and I really loved being principal of that school. I had 505 4- and 5-year-olds. It was a pre-KK building. And we made great strides in education there. I made great strides with the parents. It was a good thing for me, and it was probably, out of everything that I did up to this point, was probably the thing that I achieved the most.
Most rewarding.
Yeah. Yes, but it still didn't give me what I needed. I had beautiful bulletin boards that I created, but I needed something more than creating that fabulous bulletin board.
Yeah.
I needed more, and I needed to do this.
Cool.
I was scared changing jobs. I mean, I didn't leave my job because I didn't like it. It was really a location thing. Taking care of sick children, especially when I worked at NYU, I mean, AIDS was still very prevalent. It was an honor to take care of these children and their families. And the same thing with mental health. I mean, coming out at a time, working at a time where, you know, Prozac had been out, but it was all these new medications coming out, all these new antidepressants. They had just come out with Clozaril, which was something that essentially cured schizophrenia. So it was a very exciting time to be working in those fields with what was going on. Had I not moved, I probably would have not changed. I probably would have been doing something on the side to fuel my creativity. But I just really enjoyed the creative side of it also. But it's scary going from, like, you know, once you're in nursing, once you get a job, you have a job.
Yeah.
You go there every day, and no matter how bad it is, you get to leave at a certain time. Being in an entrepreneur with your own business.
And the medical field on top of that is sort of recession proof. You know,
Yeah,
my
exactly.
father-in-law is also a pharmacist, was a pharmacist, and he pushed my wife and her siblings to all go into the medical field because you're always going to have a job when you're in the health field.
Right.
That's what they used to think about education.
Yeah,
You'd be a teacher. You could be a teacher forever. And
But I
could've
mean,
been,
face it, we are a luxury profession, and not, you know, anyone could buy a sofa. You don't need an interior designer. You have to want an interior designer. You have to want your environment to say something about you and be different than just quote unquote furniture. But it was different for me because, you know, you have to keep looking for the next job. You have to market yourself. And that's a scary premise from going from I have a job and no matter how bad it is, you know, I get to go back the next day and I don't have to worry about a paycheck.
Yeah.
right.
And just sometimes even just turning this job off. It's one of the things my husband, you know, gets crazy. Come out of your office. It's 8 o'clock. You could do this job 24/7. So I'm grateful for the work, and I tend to overwork it when it's there because I'm grateful it's there, and you just don't know, you know.
You don't know when the next
You
one's going to go.
hear the economy is getting bad, or, you know, who's going to be president, or what's happening with the interest rates. I'm very immersive in whatever I'm doing. So when I was in nursing, I was always studying, going to conferences, reading. I'm very much the same in this career. It's not just what you can bring in, but I love the celebrity with it. I love the, you know, interior designers. I love the whole industry, but it can be a little nerve-wracking because, you know, if you listen, I love to listen to the Business of Home podcast, and you hearing all these different things with interest rates and what's going to happen if there's a Democratic president versus a Republican, and it's.
I'm in the same boat as you guys. We're a commodity,
Yes.
and people don't
A luxury.
Exactly. People don't. Most of my clients are in the luxury field, so you know, you guys are my clients. So if you don't have work, I don't have work.
Right.
So yeah, it is scary. Look, I usually book up 3 to 4 weeks in advance. I have some jobs in June, but I have nothing in July. So, you know, there's some part, I know it'll fill up, obviously, but there's a part of you knowing that if 6 weeks from now I have no work, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
You know?
And there's two sides to this. There's doing your job and doing it well, and then there's the whole financial side behind it. Are you doing your own accounting? Are you doing your own marketing? Are you keeping up on social media? You know, what organizations do you belong to?
The business side of it.
Yes, and that can run its own amok too. You got to do both.
And
a lot of juggling.
Right. The hardest part is because I didn't work for somebody first, it didn't give me that exposure to people. So I'm sort of running a little faster to try to
Catch up
and get things going and started, which is not easy. Mm-hmm. It's really not easy to get yourself out there. And you know, it's funny, when I was marketing and doing PR for other things, it seems like I always had good ideas about how to get there. Sometimes it's like the thing that's hard for me now is to get myself out there and known to other people, and that's a hard part.
Yeah.
And
That's
we're
the
in a
hard
very saturated market.
Yeah, there were
There's a lot of interior designers.
So, final question I'm going to ask before we wrap up. For somebody who's considering transitioning to another career, any advice you would give them, whether it's they're in their late 20s or they're in their 30s or 40s or 50s even, whatever it is, you both experienced that, you several times. So what advice would you give them, or do you have any advice? And it doesn't have to be something specific, but just...
I think one of the things that is, first of all, I think you have to be realistic about what your skills are and who you are and how much you can tolerate as far as change. Some people can't tolerate change at all, so they stay with something for 40, 50 years. I didn't see myself doing that. I had different goals when I started, and I felt when I didn't get my when I didn't finish the doctorate, that it didn't give me my real true what I wanted to do in life, which was very creative. I wanted to be assistant superintendent for curriculum. I wrote curriculum, so I wanted to do that, and that was creative.
Yep.
But when it didn't happen, I didn't say, I'm bitter about it. Where you see people are bitter and they didn't get the job they wanted or do what they wanted. I've never been bitter about it, upset when it didn't work out, like, the hospital situation got sold and I was gone. That wasn't my choice. But I think, number one, you have to know yourself. You have to be honest about what your strengths are. And you have to be honest about what your goals are. Where do you want to be in 10 years? Where do you want to be in 20 years? Where do you see yourself going in the future? Do you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life? Maybe you're in a job that you love, but do you really see yourself doing this for the rest of your life? Another 50 years. I've been in the job market over 50 years. It's like, do you want to do this forever? I always felt that I was healthy and energetic, and I didn't need to just do one thing. I had a lot of interests. So as long as I'm alive, I could keep doing whatever I wanted to do, because you have one life to live. I was like the Walter Mitty of life. It's just that you could keep doing whatever you wanted to do. And that's my philosophy, is that I didn't have to have one thing. I didn't have to be known as a teacher forever. My grandfather used to rest in peace. Even when I left teaching and I was in public, he said, "Oh, yes, she's a teacher." No, I wasn't a teacher. I've been out for a long time. But in his mind's eye, I was a teacher. But in mine, it wasn't. So
sometimes people, I think, don't take chances because they might feel trapped, like they might be the breadwinner of the family, or they might be the family that really needs those two salaries. It could be very hard to, I think, follow your heart when logically you're looking at financial situations. But I'd say dip your toe into something. People looked strangely that there was a nurse in scrubs sitting in the back of their color class, but I didn't need to be matriculated. They would let anyone take a class there, so I tried it. I didn't know it was going to be a career. It was just something that interests me. And you never know what you're going to become passionate about and find that you're actually talented with, and give it a shot. Dip your toe in it and see where it goes.
See, the thing is that my early careers were all because I had to survive financially, but it didn't have to be the same career. So I did choose careers that kept me afloat because I had to be. I was, in the beginning, I was part of a career family, and then I was a single mom. So I had to keep everything afloat. I had to pay for the house and the car and the whatever. But I think you have to be true to yourself. There's no point in being miserable in a job because you're going to make everybody else miserable and you're not going to do a great job. Yeah. To me, I'm a type
very
A
lucky
person.
To be able to do something that we are passionate about, have a talent for, and that it serves people, and you can make a career out of it.
No, it's the most incredible. I speak to colleagues all the time, and I say we take pictures for a living. Think about it. No, it's remarkable.
But see, I love pictures. I have cartons of pictures of my mother's.
But point being, doing what you love.
You're saving there, but you're saving in a way.
Yeah, but I don't mean me specifically, but I mean...
But you shouldn't put it down because I think that pictures, serve a lot in people's lives.
Yeah, but I mean in terms of, we're being creatives and we're doing something passionate and we're not...
you can simplify it. I put paint on a wall.
Yeah.
You you take pictures, but it's so much more than that.
It's creative.
And
we're creating something from nothing. And
and you're also preserving the now for later.
Yes, the now never looks as good as it does now.
Exactly, exactly. So it's nice to be in creative and being around creative people because sometimes we were sharing wallpaper with Lisa that day. Sometimes it's just a matter of, we talk wallpaper. My husband goes, how do you talk wallpaper? I said, well, she had this project and she needed, and we all just put our heads together. But it's okay to be creative together.
Sure.
It's a field where if you're not, in some ways
that's the whole
cutthroat.
point of IDS.
Exactly, but in some ways it's cutthroat, but in other ways it's sharing. It's bouncing off of.
Yeah.
And I like that aspect about IDS. It's when I first started in this, a lot of the more senior designers, nobody shared anything.
Correct.
You were not getting who their wallpaper person was, where they shop, anything. It was a big secret. And it could be a very isolating career in that aspect. And that's one of the reasons I liked IDS. I met so many great vendors there. And it just seemed to attract a group of people, that philosophy, a rising tide lifts all boats, and that we were all in this together. And interior design could be very strange in some ways because there's no one way to do it. And you can interview 5 interior designers. They will tell you 5 different ways they work. I think it's very confusing for the consumer that way. But when you all just start discussing best practices and you start unifying, it really elevates the career and it makes it easier for the consumer to understand.
No, for sure. That's one thing when Dean and I spoke for the podcast episode. I kind of stressed that my philosophy is colleague, not competition, because I think it's just going to help everybody grow, especially the industry. I know from a photography standpoint, because that's what I can speak for, when we're all colleagues out here on Long Island and you sort of have standard rates across the board, stuff like that, it just helps the industry grow versus...
Right, because if you're not basing a decision on price, you're basing who you get along with, what kind of personality attracts you,
exactly.
Then everyone gets the best result.
Exactly, and I would imagine it's the same thing for you.
Right, I think about the last meeting we had, I was sitting there, we were sharing from our phone, our contacts. And I did it yesterday, someone called me and I shared a contact. It is what it is, and if we don't share those, what are we gaining from it?
The industry doesnin grow.
It doesn't, and you don't. You have to learn something new every day, or you don't grow, and that's my education background. But I always told everybody, you have to learn something new every day. So if I find out that she had a problem with the wallpaper, but this wallpaper hanger did a great job with it, and so it wasn't a problem, then I know if I'm going to use this wallpaper, I'm going to call Christine and find out who the paper hanger was that solved the problem, which is simplifying an issue, but but that's what we're saying. It's like, I want to be able to call you. I gave someone ideas the other day on a phone call, but she called me and asked me, and she said, do you know somebody who, and I did. But I think the more we share, the more the industry grows, and I think it's less fearful of saying, "Oh my gosh, she's going to get my client. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to even mention her name because if I do, they're going to say, oh, but maybe I could have had Christine instead of Estelle." And I think we have to get over that.
Plus, you don't know who's going to talk you off the ledge the next day. We've all had really bad days, and it's just so nice to be able to call someone who completely understands and isn't having that day. Say, yep, been there. This is what you do, and
when you wake up in the morning, it's going to be all right.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it is true. We've talked about clients who have been difficult. And we still smile and go back and work with them. But it's always nice to have someone who said, yes, I know that because I had someone who did the same thing. It's just a different kind. It's not as isolating as some careers. Yeah. Careers I've been in are very isolating. I think about being in a classroom all day long and not being able to get out, until they have a special. And, it's like hard to do that. I just find that there are certain things that are more isolating. This isn't isolating. and it's creative, and it's all those things. I
But
don't
that's
think
where
people
your
should do that.
experience comes into.
Right.
I say to myself when I'm having a bad day, nobody died.
Right, exactly.
And it's...
That's a great perspective for not just your job, but for life.
Yeah.
But it is true.
Yeah.
Nothing is so awful that it can't be fixed.
Correct.
If you have a good solution, I like to think
And a
of
good contractor.
an out-of-the-box solution. I just like to, one of the things I remember when I went back to education after being out for 18 years, and someone said to me, but you're thinking of things that we've never done before. And I said to them
Isn't
at a
that
meeting,
the point?
and is that something bad?
Yeah.
But apparently it was. People were very intimidated and very upset about that. Where I'm in a situation now, and the more I think out of the box, the better it is,
Yeah.
as opposed to being lockstep into that situation.
No, it makes sense. All right, with that, we're gonna call it a wrap and close out. I want to thank Estelle Weiss and Chris Conte for coming on and joining us today. Again, thank Element Lighting and Decor for giving us this space here today, and we'll see you all in the next episode.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.